Imagine walking into a room full of people, friends, family, colleagues, and instead of feeling weighed down by questions like, what do they think of me? What will I get out of this? You feel light, open, and free. You're not calculating who owes you what or keeping score of who gave more. Instead, you feel a steady joy in giving, in connecting, in simply being present with others. That is the secret to abundant relationships, giving without expecting back. It may sound simple, but in practice, it is one of the most transformative and challenging shifts we can make in our lives. When you stop keeping score, love and connection begin to flourish. Relationships in scarcity mindset feel like constant negotiation. Scarcity whispers, if I give too much, I'll be taken advantage of. If I open up, I'll get hurt. If I don't protect myself, I'll end up with nothing. That fear-driven voice pushes us to guard, to measure, to control. We give affection, but secretly watch for it to be returned. We offer help, but quietly expect recognition. We love, but with conditions. This conditional love feels safe, but it is shallow. It limits how deeply we can connect. True abundance in relationships begins when we shift from transaction to transformation, when giving itself becomes the reward. Think of a time when someone gave to you freely, with no strings attached. Maybe it was a friend who listened for hours when you needed to talk. Maybe it was a parent who sacrificed time or energy without ever bringing it up again. Maybe it was a stranger who offered kindness with no expectation of repayment. How did that feel? Chances are, it left an imprint on your heart, not because of the size of the gift, but because of the spirit of the giver. This is the power of abundance. It creates connection that lingers long after the act itself. Yet many of us resist this way of living. We fear being exploited. We worry that if we keep giving, others will take and take until we are empty. This is where we misunderstand abundance. Abundance does not mean allowing yourself to be drained. It does not mean ignoring your own needs or boundaries. Abundance means trusting that love is not finite, that kindness is not diminished when shared, that connection grows stronger the more it is nurtured. Scarcity believes love is a limited currency to be guarded. Abundance knows love is renewable, expansive, and self-replenishing. In romantic relationships, scarcity often shows up as subtle accounting. One partner thinks, I did the dishes last night, so you should do them tonight. Or I made the effort to plan our date, so you owe me effort next time. While fairness matters, when relationships become ledger books, love turns into a contract. Each person becomes an accountant, calculating whether the balance sheet is even. This drains the joy out of connection. Abundant love, on the other hand, says, I give because I want to, not because you owe me. This creates freedom for both partners. One no longer fears being trapped in a constant cycle of payback, and the other no longer fears that their love will go unnoticed. Ironically, when you give without expecting back, people often feel more inspired to give in return, not out of obligation, but out of genuine gratitude. Friendships thrive on this same principle. We all know the difference between a friend who keeps score and one who doesn't. A score-keeping friend might remind you, remember when I helped you move? You still owe me one. But the friend who gives abundantly, who shows up without conditions, creates a bond that feels effortless. With them, you can relax. You don't feel weighed down by hidden debts or obligations. Abundant friendships are spacious, generous, and life-giving. They remind us that love is not something to be rationed, but something to be shared freely. Abundance also changes how we approach conflict. In scarcity mindset, conflict becomes a battle to win. We demand apologies, hold grudges, and withhold affection until the scales feel balanced again. But in abundance mindset, conflict is an opportunity to restore connection, not to score points. Instead of asking, how do I make them pay for what they did? You ask, how can we understand each other better? How can this pain be transformed into growth? This doesn't mean ignoring wrongdoing. It means seeking resolution rather than revenge. When you give forgiveness freely, even when it isn't deserved, you create space for healing. You may not always get the apology you want, but you often gain something deeper: peace. Abundant relationships also require presence. Scarcity makes us distracted, always calculating, always thinking ahead to what we might gain or lose. But when you give someone your full attention without expecting anything in return, you create a rare gift. In a world full of noise and distraction, presence is powerful. When you listen without judgment, when you share without holding back, when you simply sit with someone in their joy or pain, you offer abundance that money cannot buy. Presence says, you matter. This moment matters. I am not here for what I can get. I am here because I value you. One of the most overlooked forms of abundance in relationships is encouragement. Scarcity makes us stingy with our words. We withhold praise, fearing it might elevate others above us. We hesitate to celebrate others' wins, afraid their success makes us smaller. Abundance knows that encouragement costs nothing but yields everything. When you celebrate others genuinely, you multiply joy. When you speak life into someone's dreams, you help them rise. And in lifting others, you lift yourself. Encouragement given without expectation is one of the simplest ways to practice abundance daily. Family relationships can also be transformed by abundance. Scarcity shows up in generational cycles of blame, resentment, and unmet expectations. Parents may keep score with children. After all I did for you, you owe me. Siblings may compare and compete for attention or resources. But abundance breaks those cycles by refusing to count debts. It says, I choose to love you not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. When families practice unconditional giving, healing becomes possible. Old wounds soften, rivalries fade, and the focus shifts from keeping records of wrongs to creating moments of connection. Abundance also helps us reframe rejection. In scarcity, rejection feels devastating because we see love as limited. If one person doesn't love us, it feels like we are less lovable. But abundance says, their choice does not diminish my worth. There is more love available, and I am not running out. This mindset keeps rejection from hardening into bitterness. It allows us to keep giving without fear of depletion, because we trust that love is not tied to one person or one outcome. We are free to love again, to connect again, to risk again. But how do we practice giving without expecting back in real life? It begins with small acts. Offer a compliment without waiting for one in return. Help a colleague without reminding them later. Listen to a friend without steering the conversation back to yourself. Write a note of gratitude without hoping for acknowledgement. These little acts of uncalculated kindness build a habit of abundance. Over time, they shift your focus from scarcity-driven self-protection to abundance-driven generosity. Of course, abundance does not mean ignoring boundaries. Healthy giving is not about allowing yourself to be mistreated or drained. Boundaries are what make abundance sustainable. When you know your limits, you can give freely within them. Without boundaries, giving turns into resentment, which is the opposite of abundance. Abundant giving is joyful because it comes from choice, not compulsion. You give because you want to, not because you feel you must. The greatest challenge of abundant relationships is trust. Scarcity tells you to hold back until others prove themselves. Abundance asks you to lead with trust, to risk vulnerability, to offer love without a guarantee. This feels scary because it means letting go of control. But control is an illusion anyway. You can't control how others respond, but you can control how you show up. And when you consistently show up with abundance, you create a powerful ripple effect. People begin to respond differently, relationships deepen, trust grows. And even if some do not respond in kind, you still win, because your life is richer for having loved freely. Ultimately, the secret to abundant relationships is this: love is not a transaction, it is a gift. The moment you start keeping score, love shrinks. The moment you give freely, love expands. This principle applies everywhere, in romance, in friendship, in family, in community. Giving without expecting back is not about being naive or foolish. It is about being wise enough to know that what truly sustains relationships is not balance sheets, but open hearts. Think of abundance like a river. When water flows freely, it nourishes everything around it. When it is dammed up, it grows stagnant. Your love, your kindness, your attention, they are rivers meant to flow. When you let them move without demanding repayment, you become a source of life wherever you go. And just like a river, what flows out eventually flows back. Not always from the same people, not always in the way you expect, but always in ways that remind you, love given is never wasted. So the invitation is simple yet profound. Stop competing, stop calculating, stop waiting for others to match your effort. Give because you choose to. Love because you can. Connect because it is who you are, not because of what you get in return. That is abundance. That is freedom. And that is the secret to relationships that not only survive, but thrive. Abundance in relationships deepens when we start to understand the difference between surface-level connection and genuine, unconditional connection. On the surface, relationships can look healthy. People talk, spend time together, and exchange favors. But underneath, there can be tension, expectation, and unspoken debt. These hidden transactions are the fingerprints of scarcity. You can feel it when a friend only calls when they need something, or when a partner gives affection as a bargaining chip. You can sense it when conversations feel like negotiations rather than honest exchanges. The scarcity mindset hides beneath politeness, but robs relationships of true joy. Abundance changes this by stripping away the hidden contracts and allowing connection to become authentic. Authenticity is at the heart of abundant relationships. When you give without expecting back, you no longer need to perform or manipulate to get what you want. You can show up as yourself, with your flaws, your imperfections, and your truth. This doesn't mean abandoning kindness or sensitivity. It means you don't have to calculate whether honesty will cost you love. You trust that being real will bring the right people closer and filter out those who are only there for what they can take. Scarcity keeps you in disguise. Abundance lets you breathe. Generosity in abundance also goes beyond material giving. Yes, you can give gifts or financial support, but abundant relationships are built more on giving time, attention, and emotional presence. Sitting with someone when they're hurting, celebrating their victories without envy, remembering the details of their life. These are acts of generosity that build bonds stronger than any transaction. Scarcity tricks us into thinking that time and attention are commodities too rare to share freely. But when you practice generosity in presence, you realize that giving attention doesn't deplete you, it enriches you. The more you give, the deeper the connection and the fuller you feel. One of the most transformative practices in abundant relationships is gratitude. Gratitude shifts your focus from what you're not receiving to what you're already experiencing. Instead of thinking, "They didn't thank me enough," you think, "I'm grateful I could be part of their life in this way." Gratitude makes giving itself satisfying. It turns every act of kindness into a celebration rather than a transaction. In scarcity, gratitude is withheld until someone meets your expectations. In abundance, gratitude flows freely because you recognize the gift of connection itself. Forgiveness is another hallmark of abundance. In scarcity, grudges are held tightly because they serve as currency in the relationship. You hurt me, so I won't forgive you until you pay it back. This keeps both people trapped in a cycle of resentment. Abundance breaks this chain by offering forgiveness not as a reward but as a release. When you forgive freely, you're not excusing the hurt. You're freeing yourself from the burden of debt-keeping. Forgiveness doesn't mean trust is instantly restored, but it allows healing to begin. It says, "I will not let this wound define our connection." Scarcity hoards pain. Abundance releases it. Abundance also teaches patience. Scarcity rushes relationships because it fears missing out or being left behind. It pushes for immediate reciprocity. I gave, so I want something back now. Abundance trusts timing. It knows that relationships unfold in seasons, that love may not always be symmetrical in every moment, and that imbalance doesn't mean failure. Sometimes one person carries more for a while, and then it shifts. Abundance trusts that connection, like nature, has rhythms. By letting go of the demand for instant returns, you create space for relationships to mature naturally. Boundaries are essential here, too. Giving without expecting back doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. Scarcity either builds walls too high, shutting others out completely, or lets everything in out of fear of losing connection. Abundance creates healthy boundaries, clear lines that protect your energy while still leaving space for love to flow. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges that ensure relationships remain balanced and respectful. Saying no when needed is also an act of abundance, because it ensures that the yes you give later is wholehearted. Abundant relationships extend into communities as well. Imagine a workplace where colleagues freely help one another without obsessing over credit. Imagine a neighborhood where neighbors share resources without suspicion. Imagine a faith community where service is given joyfully without expecting recognition. These are environments where abundance multiplies. Scarcity fractures communities because it makes everyone suspicious, protective, and self-centered. Abundance knits communities together because it fosters trust, collaboration, and mutual care. When individuals practice giving without expectation, the ripple effect transforms the whole environment. Perhaps one of the deepest shifts abundance brings is in self-worth. Scarcity makes you believe that your value depends on what you receive from others. If people affirm you, you feel valuable. If they don't, you feel diminished. Abundance flips that narrative. It reminds you that your worth is inherent and unchanging. You give not to prove your value, but because you already have value to share. This frees you from the exhausting cycle of trying to earn love through performance. Instead, you share love as an overflow of who you already are. And here lies a paradox. When you give without expecting back, you often receive more than you ever imagined. People feel safe with you, and safety creates trust. Trust deepens bonds, and deep bonds bring loyalty, support, and love that no calculation could have engineered. But even when love doesn't return in the way you hoped, abundance assures you that you are not depleted. The act of giving itself fills you. You are never poorer for having loved. In this way, abundant relationships are both countercultural and timeless. In a world that constantly measures, compares, and calculates, abundance dares to be generous, unconditional, and free. It dares to believe that love expands when shared, and that connection is richer when it isn't transactional. It dares to stop keeping score and start building trust. And when you live this way, your relationships become more than just exchanges of needs. They become sacred spaces of growth, healing, and joy. The more we lean into abundance, the more we realize that relationships are not about contracts, but about connection. They are not about tallying who gave more, who apologized first, or who made the greater sacrifice. They're about showing up fully, loving freely, and creating a safe space where trust and presence matter more than keeping score. When you shift from a scarcity lens to an abundant one, the very atmosphere of your relationships changes. The tension dissolves, the defensiveness fades, and in its place grows a sense of lightness, generosity, and peace. At its core, giving without expecting back is an act of courage. It means choosing vulnerability over control, love over fear, and generosity over calculation. It means deciding that your worth is not determined by what you receive, but by what you are willing to share. This choice doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger, because you are no longer at the mercy of others' responses. You are grounded in who you are, and that grounding makes your love more resilient. Relationships built on abundance also become sources of resilience. When storms come, as they inevitably do, you don't collapse under the weight of unmet expectations. You don't spend energy tallying grievances. Instead, you draw on the strength of trust, forgiveness, and unconditional connection. Abundance doesn't prevent challenges, but it gives you the tools to face them together, with open hands instead of clenched fists. And that strength becomes a foundation for joy that lasts far beyond the surface highs and lows of life. The ripple effect of abundant relationships is profound. Children raised in homes where love is given without expectation grow up with deeper security. Friend groups built on generosity become sanctuaries where people can be themselves. Communities that practice unconditional giving flourish with trust and cooperation. The shift from scarcity to abundance doesn't just change individual lives, it reshapes families, friendships, workplaces, and entire cultures. Your choice to give without expecting back can spark waves of change far beyond what you ever imagined. So here is the invitation. Begin today. Let go of the need to measure. Release the silent scorecards you've been keeping in your closest relationships. Try one act of giving with no expectation. Listen without interrupting, help without mentioning it later, forgive without waiting for repayment. Notice the freedom that comes when love is no longer a transaction. Notice how much lighter, stronger, and more joyful your relationships feel. And here is the call to action. If this message speaks to you, if you're ready to create abundant relationships filled with connection rather than calculation, then join us here at Think Fresh Daily. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with those you love, and be part of a community that's choosing generosity over fear and love over scarcity. Together, we can build a world where giving without expecting back is not the exception, but the norm. A world where abundance defines every relationship.